Okay, now you're definitely going to need a pencil and you may need some paper as well to take some notes on. So in this part we're looking at what problems might face people on the old Silk Road. You have to imagine that you may have hundreds of camels, hundreds of people travelling together, all carrying things to buy and sell between themselves and with other people, maybe even resell them or rebuy them to sell them for a further profit. But where that goes, there's going to be a lot of money, and of course, where that is, you're going to have people that want to cut corners and steal it. So you may find that there are hordes of bandits along the routes who will steal the money in the middle of the night. You may find that there is actually state bandits where kings appoint groups of people or maybe even members of their own armed forces to go to caravans and occasionally loot them or take them if they haven't paid the right taxes, or they've tried to avoid them but through paying taxes or any sort of fees, and they'll take what they want to make themselves rich. So there's that problem. Raiders were a constant problem. Hence that's why I mentioned soldiers in the other video. What were the caravans like? Well, here we have an artist's impression of a caravanserai from the Middle Ages. And all I want you to do in a moment is to reflect upon what can you see going on in this picture. Make a list on your piece of paper and think to yourself, what is happening in this scene? So press pause now and write those down. So what have you got that has occurred in this artist's impression of a caravan train coming through the Silk Road? We have clearly got fresh goods being loaded, animals being watered, people taking an interest in what the merchants are selling. You may have people unloading goods or even attempting to sell goods that they've carried so far, or maybe even buy new ones to sell on. And that could be a process of buying and selling at each and every stop you've got. You will have children playing. You'll have people just having a general rest. You're going to have animals being groomed and looked after. Perhaps they've fallen ill. You're going to have animals being repacked and make sure that they're fit enough and well enough to carry. And all of this is happening in one place, in a very busy place. So it's like, almost imagine it like a moving town full of people selling and buying. If we look at a Peshawari caravan train in Pakistan from 1910, we see the same things happening several hundred years later. Here at the height of the British Empire, you have got caravan trains travelling through from India or to India, full of goods like you've just seen, in similar looking squares, full of people unloading, loading, looking after animals, possibly buying, selling, looking for that opportunity to trade. And that's still occurring all those years later. Move forward a few more years, and here in 1928, the same thing's happening. It's still going on. You've got goods being loaded up, traded. You've got people travelling with them in order to sell. And when I was in Egypt in the 1990s, so travelling on a bit further, you still had caravan trains of camels being moved from the Sudan up through into Egypt and then elsewhere, and you'd have these little squared off blocks in the middle of the desert, perhaps with roofs all over the top where the camels could get in under the sun. And a lot of the time they were selling the selling the camels, but also I would see that they'd also be carrying frankincense that they would pick up from Yemen, and then they would be carried in great big bags like that, and that was in the late 1990s. And there would be huge chunks of frankincense, and they would be carrying those up with lots of other camels to sell as well in the marketplaces as they got closer up to Luxor and closer to Cairo. So this is still, the echoes of that trade are still existing, and there was a recent BBC series with Joanna Lumley where she retrod the steps of the Silk Road, and there was still evidence of that occurring today, physical as well. What other things would you have to worry about? Well, having looked at the fact that caravan trade is been going up until quite recently, historically, you'd have to worry about sandstorms. I've been in a sandstorm myself, they are horrid. and sand goes everywhere. Eyes, inside your ears, up your nose, into your eyes. Everywhere you go is covered in sand, in your fingernails, and it's like a wall hitting you. And all you can do is cover up, sit down. If you're inside, shut the doors, and the sand still manages to get in. And you just have to wait. And you may have to wait there for a day or two, waiting for this storm to go past. Baking heat. Having mentioned that I'd seen the Sahara, parts of the Sahara can look like this. Other parts are actually incredibly rocky. Covered, the whole place is covered with rocks, flat rocks, rocks the size of your fist, that actually make it very difficult to walk across. So most people think of deserts, think of this. Actually, deserts can be quite rocky and quite dry and quite hard as well. So that's a terrible terrain to cross across. You've got no water, it's baking hot, your goods are out there in the sun. You can feel ill, and of course you've got that lack of water to keep yourself going. And then if that isn't hard enough, there are going to be parts of India and Persia and Afghanistan that are very, very mountainous. And of course then you have to do the opposite. So you're wearing shorts and a t-shirt, walking through the desert, now you've got to cover up completely and utterly, otherwise you'll freeze. Then you've got to carry that with you all the time, or be prepared to buy that in preparation to travel over that part. So the journey went through many, many different weather conditions, and whereas you might need a sandstorm in the desert, you might end up on ice having to go slow. You might see an avalanche that slows you up. It might be you hit a snowstorm and that stops you as well. Difficult terrain. Now, when Britain was in India, the Khyber Pass was an extremely important part of keeping hold of British India, the Raj. And there what you'd have are traders coming through the Khyber Pass, which is a narrow pass through the mountains, which people had used for centuries to get goods from one place to another, mainly from the Peshawari area of Pakistan, Islamabad and India, through to Kabul and then onwards. It still exists today, and it's still a trading route today. It's still a massive area of military presence, and you'll find the Pakistani army has a huge military presence there because they worry about who would come through who may harm those merchants and cause problems. And that was a problem for the British and a problem so on and so forth through the centuries. So it's one of the very few ways through that mountain, and so it's very, very important. And here we have a photograph of those high mountains that the silk traders would go through, and that's the type of terrain they would have to cross. Very slow, take a long time, and that pass is really, really important to go through. So hopefully I've been able to show you a few ideas about problems that might present themselves in this particular video to your people on your board game. Yeah, they might hit a snowstorm, go back 2 places. They might hit a sandstorm, go back 5 places. And in the first video, hopefully I showed some people who might add bonuses to your board game. So if a scholar joined your team, then you might be able to move quicker. You know, you may get double of what's on your dice for 3 moves. So have a think about how you could use that. Hopefully by giving you that information, you will be able to apply it in some way to make your game as interesting as possible for whoever's going to use it. Maybe to throw in some wildcard rules or anything like that you want. Good luck.